record. And I wanted to start off here in the United States today. There was big news, the conviction of Derek Chauvin for murdering George Floyd. So I wanted to, it's hard to find the words, of course, in these moments, but I wanted to quote Ananya Roy, who's a professor in UCLA, who posted on Twitter, "It's a modicum of relief, but not justice. The relief matters. For justice, we have to keep organizing and fighting." I would also like to start off with a land acknowledgement. We would like to acknowledge the Lenni Lenape people, who are the original inhabitants of Lenapehoking and the island of Manhattan. The land the New School University is built upon, including all of New York City, present-day New Jersey, and eastern Pennsylvania along the Delaware River watershed, Western Long Island, and the lower Hudson Valley comprise Lenape ancestral homeland. This land was not ceded nor sold, as folklore would have us believe, to the Dutch for beads and trinkets. This land was forcibly taken through occupation by European settlers, resulting in displacement, forced migration, and genocide. In the present day, there are Lenape communities throughout North America, though much of the original Lenape territory remains under settler occupation and control. As settlers who have benefited from the colonization of sovereign land, we acknowledge our responsibility to examine and question systems of oppression that continue through to the present day and educate ourselves about the original stewards of this land. We also want to acknowledge the Haudenosaunee ironworkers from the 6 nations of the Iroquois, mostly from the Mohawk tribe, whose labor built the many iconic skyscrapers and steel bridges in New York City. As recently as 2012, about 200 of the 2,000 structural iron workers in New York City were Mohawk. Every day we view the city skyline of Manhattan, we are reminded of their contribution. And now I'd like to introduce our esteemed guest for this evening, Rejane Spitz. I was delighted last year to be connected to Rejane. As a fellow woman in technology and media artist, it is such a pleasure to be hosting you, Rejane, with such a trajectory and impact and contributions to the field of electronics art, and truly a pioneer globally and specifically as a fellow South American. I'm very proud. And your full bio has been shared, but for now I'll say that Rejane Spitz is a full professor and coordinator of the Electronic Art Lab at the Department of Arts and Design at PUC-Rio. And she holds many degrees, including a PhD in education from PUC-Rio and a post-doctorate in electronic arts from the University of California, Berkeley. So I will hand it over to Rejane. Rejane will speak for about 25 minutes, though in the spirit of decolonization, we're going to acknowledge that slow time is often more meaningful, and we'll not rush this, and we will still have plenty of time for conversation and for questions and answers. Rejane?
Thank you, Cynthia. Thank you, Parsons School of Design. Thank you all for being here. It's a great pleasure for me, and as Cynthia said, it was a good coincidence that we got connected through common interests and in many ways, and I'm very glad to be here today. So I'm going to share my screen. And the presentation today, my talk, is about electronic art as a call to action. And I think it's important to say that I believe the virtual can change the real. And because the virtual can inform, can engage, can transform, and can promote behavior change. Cynthia asked me to share a little bit of my professional life, my projects, my accomplishments, my ideas, a little bit about my teaching methods, and I would like to start by saying that life is not a continuum, linear, one direction timeline, but rather a collection of meaningful fragments that for some reason, some strange reason, we choose to keep in our memories. So I'll be talking today about these meaningful fragments of my career, of what I call my professional life, the things I remember, the things that had a special significance for me, the things that I consider that made a big difference in my life. So in 81, I had the chance to go to London for my master's degree in graphic design. I studied typography and graphic design. And in 82, I got engaged into computer graphics. It was by chance, totally out of the blue. And I got an opportunity. I didn't know much about computers, but I got a job. And when I went back to Brazil, came back to Brazil, and Rio de Janeiro, I felt that I had this mission to share with my friends, with my colleagues from arts and design, what I had learned. I mean, it was almost an obligation, that this incredible resource. So in 85, I accepted the invitation to teach at the Art and Design Department at PUC-Rio. In 86, I was already starting my PhD in the Department of Education. There were no PhDs in design in Brazil at that time. And I started to research how to teach computer graphics. I didn't know anything about that, about the teaching methods. The paradigms didn't exist. So I was very lost. But in 87, I already started teaching a program in computer graphics at this department at PUC-Rio. And 87, again, by chance, we were negotiating with IBM to try to have a lab with computers. And they paid my way to ACM SIGGRAPH 87 in Anaheim. That was my first SIGGRAPH. And that was, by coincidence, the first time they were having an educators workshop, 300 people, for the first time together in a big room. And they actually divided us into arts and computer science. But we were 300 people completely lost, not knowing how to teach this very new discipline, very pioneering times. 91, I was already so engaged that I became the South American representative in the education committee. And that went on. And one volunteer thing leads to another. Leonardo Journal, I became a member of the editorial board. And then I was invited to go to the electronic art most important symposium, the Isaiah in Australia. And the most important fragment of all for me was that in 92, I decided to create a lab, an experimental lab, so that faculty, students, ex-students, everyone from different departments could work together and discover, investigate, experiment with new materials, with new techniques, with this new thing called digital media. We didn't know much about that, but we were always ahead of our time, trying to find interesting projects to work on. So we believe that electronic art is about engagement that leads to awareness, that leads to social transformation. That's what the Laboratório de Arte Eletrônica Electronic Art Lab has been doing since 92. And along all these years, it will be like 30 years next year, I can't believe it. We've accomplished a lot. We've done a lot of interesting projects. This is just a collection of things. There's much more than this, but we were always kind of ahead of our time. We were doing augmented reality in 2010 already. There are many other things that are not in this group. But today I chose to show you a little bit of these projects, and I chose this group of projects to show because they talk about food, nutrition, public health, and eco-sustainability. So I'll start with what are you hungry for? And so we interviewed about 100, a little bit less than that, 80 to 100 people about what they thought about hunger. And we interviewed them during what they called lunchtime, whatever that meant, different things for different people. And the questions we posed to all of them were, what are you hungry for? What do you know about hunger in Brazil and in the world? Have you ever starved? What do you think needs to be done to reduce or eliminate hunger in the world? How do you contribute or could contribute to the fight against hunger? And we got all this data, all this testimonies, all this information, and we created a cafeteria-like installation where you pick a tray and you go from stand to stand, listening to their stories, to their testimonies. And we found out so many people have already had an experience of hunger in some way during a certain period of time. And you would go from stand to stand with your tray until you got to the cashier and you had to pay the bill for the testimonies you heard. And then there is a feedback section at the very end of the installation. So we had to build everything from scratch, the stands and the trays and the plates and everything, absolutely everything was done by the team. And we had a chance to present it in São Paulo, and we had a chance to present it in Paris. It was very good because we showed a little bit of what we did. And another project I want to share is the Brazilian campaign against tobacco, the national campaign against tobacco in Brazil. I was very honored to be commissioned by the Ministry of Health. And this was a big project, probably the biggest one I've ever done in my life. It was on for 10 years and it was recommended by the World Health Organization. Many other countries copied these images. We worked with the National Foundation Against Cancer, with very different sections of the Ministry of Health, and in partnership with other universities, but we were responsible for all the design. It was a difficult project because the briefing was that we needed to create an aversive campaign. It had to be very aversive. It had to create aversion. So it was very tricky, very difficult, but very successful. And the results are there for everyone to know. Brazil is a pioneer in terms of reduction of smoking in this country. And the campaign has been very, very successful. The third project I'm going to talk about is about games and interactivity in education. And then we are talking about eco-sustainability. I was commissioned to do a project in the state of Sergipe, the northeast of Brazil, where they catch crabs for their survival. They sell the shredded meat of the crabs for good money. So they have to catch the crabs, and they are doing this in a very predatory way. So the idea of the project was to work with the children from different schools and let them learn and share with the parents and families which crabs they could catch and which they shouldn't catch because it would be the loss of their income. We created something that resembled the mangrove in the region. We started recreating all the vegetation and everything. And we thought about a game that could be played exactly the way you catch crabs, with a stick. And then we had to build again from scratch all these things. And this is the kind of thing we did. So you have a stick, you have to catch the crabs, and there is a score. It tells you about the sustainability of the system. If it's a female or a male crab, it makes a difference. If it's a pregnant crab, if it's a baby, you cannot catch. And the project was shown at the Museu da Gente Sergipana in Aracaju, Sergipe, beautiful interactive museum. And it traveled through schools, and it attracted the attention of people. And the results were also very beneficial for the community. The other project I'm going to talk about is called Senses of Birth, Immersion and Interactivity. It was about public health. Brazil is the world leader in number of unnecessary C-sections and iatrogenic prematurity, which is when the prematurity is induced by medical treatment or the advice of the physician. So, and it's very sad because the proportions of C-sections in Brazil, and this research was from 2013, but it was very accurate. 56.7% of women in public hospitals were having C-sections, and 80 to 90% in private hospitals were having C-sections, because unnecessary C-sections, because the doctors would recommend or they would prefer. So 2 days before I gave a talk about this, there was an article at The Economist enhancing all these things and showing that this is so crazy that Brazilian mothers say half jokingly that their obstetricians would not know how to pull out a baby without cutting them open. I mean, it's crazy. And then we were commissioned by the Federal University of Minas Gerais, the health secretary of Belo Horizonte, and we worked in partnership with Laje. We were sponsored by Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, and we created an interactive itinerant exhibition. And the major goal was to contribute to the reduction of unnecessary C-sections and prematurity in Brazil. So it was very simple, very cheap. We had a very small budget. We used 4 ship containers covered by a tent. And that would be easy to transport. The installation had to travel around Brazil in different cities, in different locations, public spaces. And inside these 4 containers, we created a sequence of things that had the beginning was the pregnancy, you realized you're pregnant, and then there are dialogues that we're going to see, and then the birth, and then we will learn about all these processes. We wanted to create this engagement, this awareness about the fact that the C-section is a surgery, it's not natural. So I'm sharing with you, I'm sharing with you the very first experiment we did because we want everybody to feel pregnant. So we attached this hoop and this big dialogue and the baby, this experience, the baby was still sitting, but I was speechless. This is me experimenting this for the first time, testing this, and I was really good. It was very emotional, and we decided to keep this, and we refine it a little bit more. And then every visitor that would get into the installation would see himself or herself pregnant. The baby was about to be born, and they would say 3, 2, 1, pose, and the system would take a picture of them. It would post on Facebook. They could share. So everybody was sharing, people with kids and couples. And then the second section was dialogues. Instead of, we hired some artists, and instead of us telling people what's right and what's wrong, we created dialogues, controversial dialogues. So the mother would say, I don't want my daughter to feel pain. I want her to do C-sections because she will be sleeping, she won't see anything. And then the grandmother says, she will miss the most important moment of her life. I mean, if that was so bad, people wouldn't have the second and the third baby and the fourth baby. And the doctors also, some are pro, some are contrary to C-section, and they discuss. So people are watching this and getting to their conclusions about all that. Then the birth section, and this huge vagina, people will have to squeeze in the vagina, and we'll learn about the benefits of the normal delivery. And when they get out, they go into the conviviality space. Talks and lectures and classes and massage and breastfeeding and lots of interesting things, belly painting. And this exhibition was shown to schools and many different visitors and in public spaces. We got prizes for this. It was very effective again. Then we'll talk about the project Diet. Do you eat this? Smart citizenship. So it's about food, nutrition, public health. As you know, processed food is growing worldwide. Everybody likes it because it smells bad, it tastes bad, the appearance is more beautiful, it costs less, lasts longer on the shelf, and cooks faster, but we pay a very high price for all this. It gives chronic illnesses, can be diabetes, allergies, cancer, and it was important to make people aware because the packaging doesn't say much. This is the short for the ingredients, which is crazy, and nobody can read the names. They're very technical names and very complex things. So we thought this is a typical bottom-up behavior change, social innovation with citizen participation, so that people have healthier dietary choices. So we created what we call Diet. Do you eat this? And in the way of the Pokemon Go kind of thing. Instead of just searching for something, you can search for the ingredients, for the chemical additives that are placed and are inserted in kinds of food. So we just didn't want to create an app, but we wanted it to look like a game instead. So we were mimicking the lettering of the supermarkets, of the grocery stores in Brazil. They're very chaotic. So we wanted this appearance for the app. Actually, it was an app, but looked like a crazy thing like this. And we created all the screens in this very kind of style that gives you a flavor of a game. And just to show you a little bit of it. So you have missions, you have to go and find the products. Sometimes you have to find 5 products that have aspartame, for instance, in 10 minutes. And as you go along the task, you choose the mission, you scan the barcode, and then you have to create a database. This is the whole point of the project, is to create a database, because the government doesn't share this with us. And then you can have prices if you find something that hasn't been typed yet. So it's time consuming to type all the ingredients, but then you get a card as a reward for your work. And social media, you can see the profile of your friends and all that. So that gives you a glimpse of this. So the last one, I'm trying to stick to my time, will be the V restaurant, food for thought. It's something we are working on now. We all need food, but we don't know how the food we eat affect our health and the planet's health. So the question we pose is, in 2050, when we'll be 10 billion people on the planet, can we feed everyone with a healthy diet within the planetary boundaries? And the answer is yes, but it will be impossible unless we change our eating habits, improve our food production, and reduce food waste. That says the Eat-Lancet Commission on Food, Planet, and Health. And they created a report to help people in many languages. If you go to the site, you can download this. And they have a number of guidelines that people have to follow to be able to create better conditions for healthy diets and sustainable food systems so that we can survive and the planet can survive in only 30 years. They suggest a few ideas, but basically it's about whole grains, fruits and vegetables and nuts instead of meat and dairy. And so the question we pose is, how can electronic art help promote these changes? This is a big challenge we have, humanity, mankind. So we started working with this project. It's called V Restaurant, Food for Thought. It's an immersive, synesthetic, gastronomic, collaborative art installation, which brings to the table a discussion on some major challenges we face today with respect to food production and consumption on a global scale. And the goal is to help promote, again, awareness, engagement, and social change in terms of this thematic. So we have a very nice group of people working with us. So at LAI, we have a group of undergrad students, PhD students, master degree students, professionals, ex-students who come back to work with us because it's fun. And we have a partnership with the School of Design at the University of Leeds. We have also a partnership with Media Lab Computer Science Institute at UF in Niterói in Brazil. And because of all this, we have all this professional expertise, including a restaurant owner that was one of my ex-students who still works with me, and a chef de cuisine who is a PhD student in design. And then we are creating this installation. It's a work in progress. Of course,
Isso que eu não ia comer mais hoje.
The sound is, someone is talking. Can you turn the, okay, thank you. So the installation we are creating is important because we were caught by the pandemic. It's important that we understand we started this 2 years ago, And we are actually working very hard to keep the pace on. And so the installation is about a flow of sections. You get in, the chef receives you and welcomes you with a drink and talks about food waste and recovery. And then there is this group conversation about things, and then you put the headset on, and then the VR headset on, and then you're taken to a dining room. And we're cooking up a lot of things metaphorically and literally. We're cooking up a lot of things for this installation. We have this idea of having a soup, alphabet soup that you can type in virtual reality and say something that falls into someone else's soup for this other person to eat the phrase you typed. Just to give you a hint of this is a quick demo of this. So you can type and the other person will get the phrase on their soup. And then we are working on many fronts, trying new things. And this will give you a different idea of something else that has to do with short and long supply food chains. We want to know if people are aware of how far did the food travel to get to your plate, and what's the environmental cost of your meal. So we're going to compare two things, one that comes from local grocery store or local market or local farm, the other one coming from a different continent. So this whole idea has to do with the idea of challenges that we face and challenges that we are going to share. We are having non-face-to-face meetings because of the pandemic. We have no financial resources. We are on a shoestring budget because Brazil is going through very many difficulties. You're all aware of this. We're suffering because of the pandemic. We're suffering because of the economic situation. So arts and culture and education are the first ones to go. So there is no budget for these projects. Also, the VR technology is constantly changing and we need to update the technology and the resources. The fact that we cannot share the equipment because of the pandemic. How can we share headsets with many people during an exhibition? This is another problem we're facing. International partnerships are very nice, but very difficult. For instance, language is a problem. Some people have to speak in English and not everybody in the group can speak a different language, including one Chinese student, master's student in design at the University of Leeds. And so we have a very international group. And the interdisciplinary partnerships are also very difficult because we are very romantic, we're very artistic, we are art and design. The computer science department, for instance, is more pragmatic, it's more objective. So the meetings together have different styles and different tones. So we all work together. We are trying to balance these tendencies and differences in style. But we think we should continue with this project because this is a very important project. And we believe that electronic art can be and should be a call to action. So thank you very much for this time. And I hope I gave you a good glimpse of everything I did. I also prepared a list of publications that I wrote with my students, with faculty members, with friends, with specialists from different fields related to the projects that I've just shown. So if you want to print a screen or take a picture and check later. I hope this will lead us to a vivid and fruitful dialogue and questions and things.
Beautiful. Wow, what an exciting journey. Thank you. Thank you so much, Rejane, for the overview. I will jump in with a couple of questions, and I encourage you all, you can use the raise hand feature under reactions on the bottom part of your screen, or if you want to type questions in the chat, that would also be great. Wonderful to see former students of Rejane and of Parsons and colleagues and some new faces as well. So thank you all for being here. Perhaps I'll start with a question stemming from one of your challenges where you listed that VR technology is constantly changing and needs updating. And I can imagine that since you've been practicing in this field since the mid-'80s, that you would have experienced that's the case with all technologies. And wondering if you could reflect on for us on how you stay current as a technologist. And this is a challenge that our students feel post-graduation from our design and technology program specifically, but I think art and design generally, is how do I stay up to date? How do I stay current? And any particular strategies that have worked for you?
Okay, so I had a friend called Stephen Wilson from San Francisco State University. You might have heard of him. He passed away a few years ago. And he autographed a book that he gave me about 30 years ago, actually 31 years ago, saying, I hope you keep your spirit of curiosity alive. And that's I think is the spring to everything we do. I think if you work with technology, you have to have this curiosity. You have to have this enchantment, if you like, with technology and with the changing of technology. As you say, I mean, I've seen it all, right? So in 30 years ago, 40 years ago, actually, things were faster than now. Things were faster in terms of the depth of the change. So we had to keep up with all these changes. I remember going to SIGGRAPH every year, and every year everything changed completely. The kind of software they were using, the new events, the new things, the new hardware. So yes, it's a challenge because of the cost of technology that became a threat to people who cannot equip their labs with the state of the art and all that. But the spirit of curiosity is always alive because of that. So I think there are pros and cons on this thing. And what I would recommend is that people try to see in technology the potential of technology that is not referred to. What else can this do instead of just this, this, and this? What else can it? So for instance, I'll give you an example. The pregnancy was a kinetic. So it's like you use something like a very basic tool for something that can make a difference in terms of the result of. So I think the two tips. One is keep your spirit of curiosity alive always, and don't let technology kill your imaginary desire of being able to do more with it. So this is my advice. I think it's important that people keep up with the learning things that are new, but it's also important to recover old things, to look back to certain things that we don't use anymore, we don't care anymore about them, but they might have a need and a function today.
It's fascinating that you talk about how the changes in technology used to be much faster than they are now, because we often talk about how technology is to blame for the acceleration that we're feeling in society. And I wonder if it's less to do with technological development and more to do with consumption and social media than about changes in technology.
Yes, I tell my students that computers look very much the same as they looked 40 years ago. A keyboard, screen, even a mouse hasn't changed that much, right? So most people in the world, except for a few people who are, advanced, or the ones who had Google glasses, or the ones who were able to buy a VR headset during the pandemic because they're out of sale. So except for this very small group of people, everyone is using the basic same tools that resemble the first computers we had. If you look at the basics, very much like a car. If you look at the car that is produced today, it hasn't changed. It hasn't the basics. So of course the refinements, the motors, the wheels, the gears, it's a refinement of the same concept. But back 40 years ago, every time I would go to cigarettes, there would be like a completely new idea, a completely new thing that would be a game changer in so many ways, So I was teaching this week, I was talking about very nervous system from David Rockaby. That was a game changer. That was, nobody thought about dancing in front of a camera and having the movements of your body transformed into music, into sounds. That was completely new, right? Or Myron Kruger letting a trail, a shadow be part of your image, or playing with your own image in small size on your shoulder. The video plays are very important. And so many other works that were seminal in terms of game changers. Everything changed when, for instance, with David Rockaby, when a dancer, a choreographer, produced music out of dancing on the stage. That was completely new. That was pioneering. That the concept was very different. And today we have a repetition of concepts. Of course, technology has advanced, and there are many new things. If you look at your cell phones, all the apps and all the potential, and even if you want to catch a cab, if you want to ask for a cab to come, it's a completely different style of buying a grocery and getting things online. But they remain for a longer time. There's this tale that stays. I don't know if you guys agree. I would like to hear your opinions also.
Yeah, definitely encourage others to jump in and chime in. I'll ask one more question, and then I'll turn it over to anyone else who may have a question, which has to do, and it connects to how long you've been practicing, the question of and challenge of archiving. So it's been my experience that I currently have projects stored in media that don't even exist anymore, like formats, mini discs, or zip drive was the big one when I was getting my master's degree, that I wouldn't even be able to access if I needed to. And wondering if you can suggest some best practices for maybe the people who are tuning in, who are just now getting started with their own media art practice. What has worked well for you in terms of documenting, and in terms of at what point do you give up on a technology and just assume that it lives as documentation and not necessarily as a working prototype?
Okay, so I think that there is a word in Portuguese, desapego. I don't know the translation for this in English. Maybe Bernardo can help me, or Ronnie can help me. I don't know. Desapego is when you don't care about losing something. You let go. You let go with no attachment to the thing.
Yeah, detachment, I guess.
Detachment, yeah, but it's stronger than detachment. I think it's more than that. In Portuguese, desapego is when you really cared for that. It was like your baby. It was something you really cared for, but you have to let go. It's more than detachment, right? So it's more like a decision that you make, internal decision that, okay, it's time to let go. I think documenting your work can have the same effect. For instance, I documented my work. I documented my installations with VHS. I documented things with slides, with, diapositivas, with things. I documented. I documented with old technology that doesn't run anymore. So the documentary is part of the whole idea of archiving. So I think my advice would be either you get a sponsor to keep translating your technology every year, every 2 years, every 5 years into something updated. Either you get a mecenas, someone who has tons of money that covers everything you do with, golden coins and says, okay, I'll take care. And every 5 years, I will translate everything. I will update everything into this new technology. Or have this kind of detachment or desapego. It's a good word in Portuguese to learn. There are some words in Portuguese that are stronger, that have a intense feeling to them. So, because desapego is the right way, because of course you cannot recreate the setting. You cannot recreate the enchantment. You cannot recreate what it meant to me to be in the Osmose Char Davis installation. When it opened on that first week, I was one of the organizers of IZEA 95 when it was shown in Montreal. I cannot retell, I cannot share the emotion, the novelty, the pioneering. So why would you care about? So these fragments that I was talking about are like this. These are memories I have, the memories of. So I love this idea that life is not a continuum, but here and there, the things that mattered, the things that made a change, made some impact to your life. You don't remember how did you brush your teeth 5 days ago, but if you slipped and fell and broke your hip, you would remember that. Or if someone bumped into the street with someone you haven't seen for 10 years, or if Bernardo shows up in one of these rectangles and I haven't seen him for ages, it's something I will remember, right? So these are fragments, and these are the important things about art and history and technology and humankind, mankind, or humankind as I like, because it's a womankind and mankind. So I recommend that people working with technology embrace the fact that they have to let go. They will never have a CV that reflects all they did. They cannot recount, retell, reshare, let's say, the emotions they created. And it's a big thing. About 20 years ago or more, I was a member of a panel at the Video Brasil Festival in São Paulo. Solange Farkas was the organizer. And she invited curators from the biggest museums in the world. And I was the moderator of this panel by chance. And I remember saying that this was the biggest challenge of electronic art. It's archiving. You hit the hot spot for me even 30 years ago, because there's no way. Money cannot buy the enchantment. Money cannot pay for the recreation of the setting. So even if you go to let's say we go to a solo exhibition of someone who produced work 50 years ago, you get a glimpse of it, you understand, but you cannot feel it. So
yeah, in some ways the model of ephemeral art probably could suit us well, those of us who are artists in the technological realm. It's a nice way to think about it. Thank you so much. Let me open it up. We have a question here in the chat from Loria. Were there any outcomes from the Sentidos do Nascer installation that you found surprising or particularly successful? They write, I have a curious obstetrician looking over my shoulder.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, we assumed as much, her mother.
Yes. the emotion we caused on people. One of the reports say that people were leaving the installation with tears in their eyes. And this is the most, I actually wrote this in one of the articles I wrote about the installation. And that was the most significant thing, because if you can touch their hearts, people, there was a significant change. About 60 or 70% of all the visitors, all the guests that visited the installation changed their opinion on the best way to have change their opinion from, oh, C-section is the same, sometimes it's easier, it's painless, it's, you know, it costs the same, and the doctor doesn't have to stay awake all night. And so they changed from that to, oh my God, this is a surgery. This, if this is unnecessary, people shouldn't go into that. They shouldn't let the doctor decide. They should know about the pros and cons of all that. My daughter just had a baby a month ago, 45 days ago, and counting. The baby was sitting. She did everything that was possible. In the middle of this incredible pandemic in Bahia, there were no more places in hospitals, and it was difficult to go to a hospital, even for a C-section. She did everything she could not to have a C-section. In the end, there was no way. The baby didn't turn, and the doctor thought it was better to have a C-section. And I was mesmerized by the fact that my daughter was so aware of everything. She was so eager not to have it. And she was telling me there was a change in this perception in this last few years. And people who are aware, people who get to know the possibilities of having a C-section and having complications are very big. So there is this rumor that the C-section, and there is more to that. Maybe I should share a few more things. In Brazil, the C-sections became a trend because you can have your hair done, you can have your nails painted, you can be ready to become a mother, to take that picture, to have a video. They hire people to make a video of the delivery. And so the private hospitals had like a team of workers working together with the doctors and preparing for this big thing. It was like a birthday, right? So it's a celebration, and it became a fashion. It's crazy, I know it's crazy, but that's something that happened in Brazil for some reason. So many women decided they didn't want to look bad in the pictures of the moment they were having the baby and all that. So it's crazy. And but I learned that because I worked, this was a 1.5 year project. And we started this project with a group of activists for natural labor, for natural birth. There's a very strong group in Belo Horizonte. The leader of the group, one of the coordinators of the project, is called Sonia Lansky. And she is the one who taught me everything about, because when I went to this group, I said, oh, I had 2 babies. Oh, did you have the normal? Yeah, it was completely normal. And they said, oh, yeah, can you tell us how was it? And I started to tell about my experience of having what I used to say was a normal delivery. And they said, this is abnormal. And we call it abnormal because there are so many procedures you don't have to go through if you have a natural birth. And then I learned a lot. But what they said is that they changed the perception of Brazil. The installation got prizes, and the Ministry of Health recreated something that is always on show, and it was a very important. I can give you more data. We wrote articles. There was an article about the installation wrote about 2 months ago only, And I can type, the leader of the group is Lansky, Sonia. And if you look for her name, you'll know the statistics of the importance, because this was a research, actually the before and after. So they were researching people in line and waiting to get in, and then they would research and investigate and have interviewers talking to people on the outside. So it was like the before and after. Thanks for the question.
Yeah, it's so rare that we take the time or invest in measuring the impact of our work. So that's wonderful. And there's a comment there from the mom. Your work is amazing. Thank you for sharing. Last call for a final question or comment. I see new people are arriving, and they'll be here for the final question. Anyone? I have my long list here in front of me. Okay, well, yeah, go ahead, Rejane.
A question.
You have a question?
Yes.
Go ahead.
To the audience. So when we decided to investigate about hunger, we asked a lot of people if they had starved at some point in their lives, or if their parents, if their relatives have starved. And when I posed these questions, I thought about my own family. And my great-grandfather died of hunger in one of those pogroms in Russia. He had to be in the basement. And he would feed the kids, but not himself. There was no food for everybody. And he died out of hunger, starvation, right? And I thought about my grandmother. And she came from Russia, and she had also a long period of time when she arrived to Brazil, her family was starving. They had no resources, and she used to say there was one vegetable that her mother would give her that would make them feel like, I don't even know the name of the vegetable, it's a strange word, probably in Russian, that would give them a feeling that they had the stomach full. So I ask you guys, do you have stories to share about hunger? Did anyone starved, or fathers or mothers or anyone? You can say, if you can say this in your own language, and Cynthia and I can translate, right? Nobody has a story?
It's a quiet crowd this evening.
Yeah, yeah.
I guess I've had the great fortune of not feeling hunger, though I do acknowledge that many members of our New School community rely on the food pantry that we have at our university, that is actually on the same floor as the MFA Design and Technology program. And I worry about those members of our community during the pandemic, because campus has been closed and the pantry has been giving limited hours and limited resources. But yeah, it's.
Yeah. So one thing that I learned, maybe I should share with you, is that when you come with a microphone and you ask something to someone that you've never seen before, the results might be astonishing. So every research, every project we do, when we give voice to people, let's say like this, we learn so much. People have stories, they have fears, they have challenges, and when you want to listen to people, when you give them a chance to talk, to tell their stories, and if you combine those stories, you learn so much. And so I strongly believe that electronic art can empower people because of the immersion, because of the interactivity, because of the multimedia aspect of it. You can have a synesthetic thing that gives you a chance to use all senses together. Because of all these things, digital media or electronic art, if you like, can give us so much power to change the reality, to use the virtual to change the reality, to go for causes, to go for important things. So one thing I've been telling people, and I think I should share with you, is that how can we let things go like they're going now? We have so much data collected on our cell phones. The companies have so much data. We all know about this thing, right? How come they don't use this data, this information to deal with the pandemic? A few countries did in a very special way. I mean, they most for monitoring, for restraining the for lockdowns and things like this. But I'm talking about a different thing. I'm talking about all the information circulating, all the data that we are providing. How can humankind, not be able to use this intelligence, this data, in a fruitful, in a productive and efficient way to help us fight against this pandemic? Brazil is sinking. We don't see, I mean, almost 4,000 people per day are dying in my country, per day. Almost 4,000 per day for weeks and weeks. It has been like this. And everybody is kind of immobilized. So I ask you for spreading the word that technology can do much more than it's doing. Technology was meant to be a connection for solving problems. It was meant to be a way in which we can find solutions for things in a quicker, more efficient, and more intelligent way. The bigger the collection we have of data, the clearer the picture becomes. You know, the resolution is higher, right? So we know. And not many people are doing many things about this. What Johns Hopkins, for instance, did in the very beginning of the pandemic became like the thing. But that's just a one initiative. There's so many other things that can be done. There's so many other ways that technology and technologists and electronic artists can be contributing to this situation that is killing so many people in this planet. And we are passively watching and not coming. Yes, the vaccines, yes, the doctors, yes, the nurses, yes, of course. But this is like the result of the pandemic. We have to fight the communication. We have to fight against it from the beginning, in the middle, and in the end. Cannot be just a result of the fact that so many people are catching COVID. We have to do something. Someone has to come up with incredible ideas for smartphones, for connections, networking with people, for online connections. Someone has to come up with a great idea in terms of technology. And I think this is the group who could do it. And I share this fear and this hope with you.
Thank you, Rejane. What a powerful way to end this evening. Please, everyone, join me in thanking Rejane so much for your time, for your generosity, for the tour that you gave us through your amazing body of work. I'd also like to thank our organizers, my colleagues, Richard Tay and Sven Travis, Kaylin Chung and Richard did the graphic design, program coordinator Sam Morrison, and supporting from the program, John Sharp and Melanie Crean, program directors in design and technology. And want to invite everyone here to join the final Cloud Salon of this semester, which will be next Thursday, the 29th at 7 p.m. with Audrey Bennett. And I will stop the recording here. And